Hey, welcome to the First Layer, and this is Ask for Help, our weekly Q&A, where you get to ask questions about 3D printing, and we'll do our best to answer them. With me today is my good friend, Brian Baker.
Hello. Hopefully I'm coming through okay. I haven't tried any of this audio right now, so...
Yeah, you got audio. Yay.
Yes, awesome. And Richard, you're kind of gating out a little bit on the low end.
Oh, wow.
Maybe that's just, I don't know.
I don't know. It's all weird.
It's
all weird.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well. We'll figure it out.
It's okay. We'll deal with funkiness, guys, because I'm like, even here, I've got like a ring light I haven't even set up yet, so I can do rainbows and all sorts of color filters on me, yeah. So it's got like 50 modes, so it takes forever to try and remember where the heck I should be on it. There we go. There's our white.
There, how's that? Is that better? It should be better now.
That's much better.
Okay.
There we go.
All right. So, before we get started...
Apologies, everyone.
I want to say happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Happy Canadian Thanksgiving.
Yes, Canadian Thanksgiving, because we are up here in Canada. And I
the
want
only thing we get to do first in Canada, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm going to run through a list of people I want to thank. These are our members, starting with Peter Reynolds, who is our oldest member, or one of our oldest members on our members here on YouTube. Then we've got Amanda M., John Moody, Ian Jones, Winston Fernandez, Robin Provo, I hope I said that right, Roberta Humberstone, Nas Masella, RT, which is our good friend Richard Taylor, Max CJ12345, Gary T, World Planet Gadget, Scarecrow, Gary Surface, Phil, Michael Hedges, Raymond Cleveland, Andrew Majewski, Rick B, Robert Coble, Stephen Snow, Snapshot FTV, M3, or pardon me, 3D2Me Coat, Mika Steve, Dominic Versetto, The Apprentice 2021, Jim Fleming. Ian Fleming's an author. Dart 257, BLC Halifax, William Shank, Robert Lee, Dennis Kelly, and our newest member, Andrew Osmond and Accord XTC. Brian just went all dark.
I'm just hitting camera controls. Sorry, that's on me.
Thank you, everybody, for being a member. And all of those names are automatically entered into our draw for our very first mystery box, which we are going to be drawing live next Sunday. So the cutoff for next Sunday is today. And then we're going to start a new round, and we will be doing another giveaway on the 31st of October of our mystery box. Now, speaking of mystery box, because some people have been asking me about this already this week, I have a mystery box from these guys.
Ooh, shiny.
It is shiny. And we all know who these guys are. Our good friends Matter 3D, Aman Baines, Gurnaman Singh, and the rest of the crew over there at Matter 3D threw this into our retail order for us to sell. And this is, and I'm going to show you what it is. Dun, dun, dun. I'm going to put it down on the desk, open it up. Brand new roll. And we're going to open it together right here because I have to take pictures of it today. So we're going to...
I want it. I don't even know what it is, but I want it.
We're going to open it up. Love that sound of crinkling plastic.
Right, and that's like some pretty thick vacuum bags.
Yes. Are you ready? It's our purple! Da, da, da.
It's purple.
It's purple. Look how nicely that is wound. That is gorgeous. They've really stepped up their game on winding. And I got to tell you, I love the color. We are going to be printing with this. I'm going to do a test print with it a little bit later on today after I do some pictures with it. But we will be having a TFL purple very soon for you guys to order from us and from our online store shop, thefirstlayer.com, which, I have to give you an update, will actually be launching 2 weeks later than I said it was going to launch, on the 15th. So check our shop, thefirstlayer.com on the 15th of October, and hopefully we'll have some of this to sell. If not, we've got some of their stuff on our website that is going to be ready to sell anyway. So that is TFL Purple from Matter 3D, and we really appreciate their support for the First Layer and helping us get out a great product. And we want to wish them a very happy Thanksgiving as well. So, Accord XTC nailed it. LOL.
Well, it's been long in the works, and there were a couple prototypes that were a bit more plum that were like, you know what, it's not our color, but that doesn't mean we don't like it.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what, it's Amin and now Gerdman's back there, the two of them, and any of their new associates. I'm sorry I haven't kept track of any new additions there, but they put a lot of work into the material science of the PLA in the first place. And now you'd think, okay, maybe they're just kind of going to reap the benefits. No, they've jumped in, put more money in, and now they're working on refining colors. And where this is going to be important for you, maybe not for those of us who go and print gray models all the time to paint ourselves, but for those of you who are printing big objects that need that color consistency, this is the main target now, is to get it so that your colors align batch to batch the same, so you can print something massive 3 months apart and be in that same realm. So this is just, one of the many reasons why we have pushed Matter 3D, is because the focus on the quality to the end user has been much higher in their direction, instead of just following on the cheapest material that's the easiest to print. And for those of you who have used it in the chat, I'm sure you can attest to the quality of the parts and how they're holding up after 2 to 3 months. And unfortunately for me right now, I haven't been able to bring anything to show you because I am, halfway across the country, if not further, from my printers. So I've been itching to get back to my machines. If you haven't seen my posts on the Facebook group, I've been wanting to see some prints to kind of get me inspired and jump ahead and think ahead before I come back to my machines. And that's a little hint in terms of video content you might be seeing coming in the next couple of weeks here, as I look to what I can do while I'm away. So stay tuned for that.
I am. You're going to notice it's a little bit of a mess behind me for the last couple of videos. We're in transition here in the house. We're moving some things around. The studio is going to be changing for the new year. So you guys are going to see a little bit of that as we move forward. My wife and I, Jerry, who is monitoring the chat today, she is working hard as well as I am to get everything sort of organized so that we have the right space to do the right stuff. We've got stuff scattered all over our house right now, and it looks like a bomb went off in here, so bear with us, please.
That's okay. I've been in the same boat because I forgot the day that they were going to do house cleaning on the rooms here. And so I left my room in a disaster on Friday thinking, you know what, I'm going to clean it all up Saturday evening, and they'll clean the room Monday. Well, no, they came through on Friday, and I came in, and I felt sick to my stomach for a minute. So I was like, uh-oh. But you know what? Hey, kudos to them. I left all my laptops and stuff in the room, and they were all still here when I came back. So that was nice thing. Yeah.
I also want to thank all of our viewers today who are here. Happy Thanksgiving to you all. Thank you for being a part of our show, because without you guys, we wouldn't have this live stream. So we do thank you for joining us today. Spreading the word. Let's talk a little bit about the episode that was released yesterday. Priming you for 3D printing with resin. We've had a lot of comments, and I really like to see those comments. And that goes into our giveaway for next week that we're going to be drawing live. So leave a comment, leave a like, make sure that you are a subscriber. If you're not a subscriber, all of our members are automatically entered into whatever giveaways we're doing at the time, because it is. I got a little pop-up. Sorry, squirrel. It is. It's important that you guys know that, and we are going to be putting some of that purple into our first giveaway box. So if you want a sample of that purple, you definitely want to make sure that you've liked the video in the last couple of weeks, you've left a comment on that video, and that you are a subscriber. Those three things have to be met in order to get entered into the draw for the giveaway. So,
and I think, if you can correct me if I'm wrong here, I believe that's actually the first roll of purple that we have received. So this winner may be printing with our purple before we have even printed with it. Well, so, yeah, you can.
I'm going to print with it a little bit before I start taking samples off of it.
Yeah, you're going to get you're going to get some sampling off it there, but you'll be one of the very first to play with it. Yes. But just jumping back to our video about resin, actually, the timing could not be better for this video to come out. While I'm out here in Northern Ontario, I've spoken with a few people locally who are in the model railroad market, and we've been talking a bit about how resin printing has given them the ability to make microscopic, I say microscopic, but very minuscule scale versions of the most random items to put into into your model train set. And the question that actually I got this week was, what can I do to get an ATV for some of my train yards, because up here they ride ATVs around. Mm-hmm. And so what this person was doing was going on to Shapeways, which is, for those of you who don't know, Shapeways has been around before consumer 3D printing was even a thing. Back when I was in college, actually, we would upload models to Shapeways, and we'd find out that, in my case, the Batman can opener topper that I made would cost $1,300 Canadian to print in gold, but it was doable. So either way, this individual was going on to Shapeways, and Shapeways gives you the ability to have a marketplace where you can list some of your model designs, but you can also sign yourself up to be a farm for some of the Shapeways items. And so this guy was going in and buying it. But the challenge with that is that when you're on Shapeways, you're limited to what their model files have. And so this was a great gateway to start talking about how you can go to Thingiverse, get printable models, and now you can get resin printers in the low $300 in the Canadian realm, so probably under $200 US in some cases. And for a model railroader, something such as a Mars Pro does more than you could ever imagine. And this is kind of what we're kind of hinting into this hobby now, is that there's always solutions if you just want to print off 1 or 2 items without diving into the hobby. It is a very hands-on experience working with printers. But if you're ready to make that jump and produce more than, say, a couple items every year, now has never been a better time. The resin market's starting to recover on supply, and the machines are just flooding the market, and the technology is rapidly evolving, similar to what we saw when Creality dropped the CR-10 and the Ender 3. So for those of you who aren't following it, the Jupiter, which is about to wrap up its Kickstarter, has like a 13-inch screen or something ridiculous on it. And for a long time, all we could get was the standard 4.3-inch or 5.5-inch, I can't remember the number, LCD screens, and all the machines were based off that. But now we're seeing the bigger and bigger options come out. So what's that going to mean for you? There's going to be more available resin, and it's going to come cheaper as these larger machines use more resin. So I truly believe that we are getting into resin season, and if you haven't, please go watch our most recent video here.
Yeah, hey, we got a super chat from Mr. Henry Stofferin, a longtime viewer and member of the show. Enjoy some ham, he says. We definitely will enjoy some ham. Funny thing is, that's my wife's maiden name is Ham.
and this is treated me as a Walmart that I just got back from, and thank you. Now I'm going to be going over there and buying some honey ham for tonight, because in a small town where I'm at, I can go out for a full turkey dinner, sure, but I really don't want to eat that much. So I'm going to get myself a packet of ham, a can of cranberry sauce, some old PC free and clear, and I think I'll be good.
I'm not sure what we're having for supper tonight, but I'm sure my wife will come up with something for us. Something with hamburger, she says. Maybe it's going to be hamburger helper, But
nothing.
Nothing wrong with that. I want to tell you guys that this week's episode coming up, we're going to take what we talked about in yesterday's video, and we're going to put some of that into practice with the resin printer. We're going to be using the Creality LD-002R, which was kind of their second foray into resin printing or resin printers. We're going to be using some Phrozen resin as well, so we're going to be talking a lot about that. I'm going to show you how to use T2 Box to prepare your model. So a lot of the stuff that we talked about in yesterday's episode, we're actually going to put into practice in this week's coming episode. So you guys make sure that you want to be in on that. And again, leave a comment, leave a like, and make sure that you are a subscriber to get entered into the draw for the end of the month. Because next Sunday, I'm either going to be here or I'm going to be in Victoria. I'm still not sure which. But I will be heading out.
Gonna wing it, right?
Yeah, I'm going to be heading out to Victoria sometime this month, where we are going to be doing some behind-the-scenes episodes with our good friends out at Matter 3D. So we're going to get to see their operation from the inside out. So you guys will get to see how filament is actually made here in Canada. We're going to talk about a lot of the technical stuff about filament. So you want to make sure that you're a member and that you've got your notifications turned on, or you want to be a subscriber and have those notifications turned on, because when that drops, there's going to be a lot of really cool stuff going on. So make sure that you are part of that. So we are 20 or 15 minutes into our show already. So let's get some questions happening, you guys. If you've got some questions, please put them in the chat. Jerry's going to throw them up on screen when we see a question, and we're going to move forward with that. But in the meantime, let's talk a little bit more about resin and the safety procedures that are involved with resin. Resin is not something to take lightly. It is a little bit of a different learning curve, as I expressed in yesterday's video. You really do need to have the proper safety equipment. I always say to wear safety glasses or some sort of goggles that won't allow the resin to splash back in your face. And always wear gloves. I use a thick 5mm nitrile glove that I get from Princess Auto here in Canada. You can get, they're a Gorilla Glove, I believe they're called. And you can get those from Harbor Freight, I believe, in the U.S. They're fairly inexpensive for a box of 50, I believe. There's 50 pairs in there. If you get the thinner ones, they're 100 to a box.
Luckily, due to the global supply chains, these safety equipment items are finally becoming readily available again, notably N95 masks and things like that. Although you don't really need an N95, no. Depending on your situation, it doesn't hurt to have one on hand that you use for the 5 minutes that you pop off the cover of your resin machine. If you watch guys like Tom Sandelander, he does wear a respirator, and that's based off his experience with resin and providing the safest option for you. But interesting that we were talking about the glasses there, because I did have an instance this week where I was working on a panel in an area where we didn't have to wear the safety goggles at that moment. And while I was working with a wire, it flinged back and flinged one of the little labels on the end and whacked me in the forehead. Now, of course, I'm fine. But if that hit me in the eye, there could have been a problem. And with resin, the good thing is you don't have to worry about it being a projectile strength like a plastic or any of the other materials. I'm trying to remember, it's Z87, I believe it is. Z87 is the specification for safety glasses. Honestly, go to the dollar store and get something that's supposedly a safety glass, and it'll be more than fine for resin. Or if you're really concerned, get something that has a gasket that seals up to your eyes. Because that's probably the easiest thing that you could damage with resin. And then, as we've kind of talked about resin before, in Canada, we're very lucky that a lot of our windows have UV-treated glass. And so you don't hear up in Canada really of people spilling resin on their hands and then burning. And that's because the thermoelectric, or the thermochemical reaction, if you will, only occurs when that resin starts to cure. So that's not to say if you're allergic to one of the materials, you wouldn't have a reaction. You could still have a reaction. But a lot of the burns you see online is when people end up spilling the chemicals on themselves, don't remove that chemical properly before coming into a light source that is within that UV spectrum to cure it. So we always play on the safe side, guys. You don't have to go and get up in a Marty McFly style plutonium suit, but it couldn't hurt. Get a pair of kitchen gloves even from your local dollar store that go up to your elbow just to prevent the splashback, and a pair of goggles. And if you are sensitive to the fumes, any kind of mask will be sufficient to reduce that scent. But if you are looking for the true particulate removal, you need to look into N95 and higher. But there's a bottomless hole of resin and when it comes to knowledge. And the fact is, it is a new technology to the market. And as a lot of manufacturers add different things, the hope is that they've gone through and have met all the chemical specifications. But it doesn't hurt once in a while to even ask the company for your material data safety sheet. If those of you who went through school remember MSDS, this is the time to pull the MSDS sheet and just read it through. And if they can't provide one, then you have to make your determination if you're comfortable moving ahead with that material. But as far as I'm aware, everything sold in North America, they have to provide an MSDS sheet.
All right, there's a question here from Kevin Coogan. Jerry's going to pull it up here. He says, what changes should I do for slicing with PLA over to ABS? I have an Ender 3V2 using the 12/864 LCD in direct drive. I know I need to do a cold pull when switching back to PLA. Okay, Kevin, I'm going to actually pull up the software right now because we have it here. And now I got to find my mouse. There we go. There we go. Cut over. Cut over. There we are. All right. So here we have our software up on the screen. And when you are going from PLA to ABS, the first thing that you want to do is go up to this middle section. You'll see now it's highlighted in blue. And you're going to come down to where it says material. And you're going to change it to ABS, which if you're using generic brands that aren't listed in this, and you can see that there are quite a few brands, even Aeron's in here now. They've really done their homework, and they've really added a lot of different popular brands of filament. So we're just going to go right up to generic for starters. We'll go to ABS, and we're going to see that ABS has already switched for us, and we're going to see over here that our temperatures, if we go down to the material, we're going to see that our temperature has changed to 230. Okay, what you want to do first and foremost is preheat that machine. Once you've done this in your slicer, you really don't need to do much else, except for where it says here that initial printing temperature 240. You can leave it at that. That's just going to drop your first layer down at a higher temperature just to make sure things are flowing. Depending on the manufacturer of your ABS, you want to make sure that you've got your machine covered. So you don't want to print this in open air, especially on an ender. You want to put some sort of covering over it to keep all the heat in and drafts away. Because what will happen with ABS when you introduce some sort of draft into the room, whether it be a fan or a venting, it's going to start splitting. Because what happens is it shrinks much faster than PLA does. So you can get splitting in the layers. You can get curling in the corners. There's a number of things that can happen. Your model can be weaker. You're also going to be introduced to that ABS smell that you're going to undoubtedly smell when you're printing with ABS. So very much I would say to you that if you're going to print with ABS, make sure that you have the proper things. Like, it can be as simple as a box. I don't recommend putting a garbage bag over top of your 3D printer like some people have done in the past, because that thin plastic is very flammable. Any spark can start that plastic on fire, and you don't want that. That plastic, if it droops and hits that hot end, guess what? It's going to stick to that hot end and can cause you more problems than it's worth. So get a box. I would say just use a cardboard box, put it over top of your printer if you're going to print with ABS, and just let it print. Check on it periodically to make sure that it's not failing in any way, and that should solve most of any issues that you may have moving to ABS. And as far as doing an atomic pull, I don't really worry about that. I usually will heat my hot end up to that 260, the top range that it will go on my ender, and then I will push through the new material, such as PLA or PETG. I'll push it through until that color starts to come out, and then I'll know that new color starts to come out, I should say. Then I know that I've got that hot end cleaned out of that old material. I can let my printer settle back down to the 205 or 200 that I usually print PLA with. And don't forget to turn this back to PLA when you've got, or when you are going back to PLA, because I've seen people that have, or I just changed it to PVA. I shouldn't have. I should change it to LA. There we go. One above. Go ahead, Brett.
Now, I'm not sure if for the material there, bear in mind, generic PLA on these drop downs, there are ways to go and define your own profile per brand of material, even within Cura and Prusa Slicer and all these other ones. So generic is a baseline profile to start with, but as you go and tune in for different manufacturers, you can save custom ones. For instance, I have one for Matter 3D PLA versus what I will call cheaper PLA, because the Matter 3D prints at a hotter temperature than what you would ever really run most PLAs at. Now, the only other thing I wanted to add, because Kevin, I didn't see this defined on your question, is are you still on a Bowden tube setup? And if so, what kind of Bowden tube are you using? The reason I bring this up is because I know a lot of people want to print ABS on the Ender 3s, and although we like to push people to get a Micro Swiss all-metal hot end as the desirable route, the cheaper option is to also replace your Bowden tube with a Capricorn tube that is rated for a higher temperature, because regardless of what material you're printing in there, the default Bowden tubes are just not very good above 240 degrees. Richard, maybe you can catch me on this. Are the V2s shipped with Capricorn tubing?
No, I don't believe they are. I believe they're still shipped with the yellow tube. Just check online.
Kevin here says direct drive with the E3D V6 all metal. And Kevin, yes, that's absolutely awesome. So as long as you've got that all metal heat break, you're pretty much set up for that material. But this is the big one that we do push a lot of people with, because especially these days, you're seeing a lot of videos on focusing around speed of printing. ABS, PETG, and everything else above that is always going to be at a slower rate because the material doesn't cure to itself at the same rates. And cracking of layers is not unique just to ABS. It happens a lot with PETG too. And that's why you really want to read into what you're working with these materials. Now, the final note with ABS, we were just quickly talking about enclosures, is that the fear around ABS with the scent is these ultrafine particles. And the fact is there's a lot of research still going on the effects, but generally anytime you're working with a melting point of a material that's not essentially liquefying at the same stage, there's an inherent risk of particles being introduced to the air. Now, whether or not they impact you is still to be determined, so we always recommend, contrary to what we're saying about not having airflow, try to keep it in an isolated or ventilated space just with a low air movement so that you don't give the ability for those particles to build up. Similar to how when you're cleaning a bathroom toilet and you're mixing chemicals for any reason, it's recommended to have a window open. In this case with ABS, you want to have a shield around the printer. You don't necessarily have to seal it off, but make sure there's a place for the air to circulate in that room out of there to make it, number one, more comfortable, and number two, more safe as time goes on.
Yeah. The other thing I want to point out that I didn't mention is that you want to make sure that you have got that part cooling fan turned off. Make sure that the part cooling fan is not running, because if it is, it's going to cause the same issues that we talked about with that air movement causing the material to shrink up too fast and for those layers to separate. So be sure to have your part cooling fan turned off.
And you guys might notice when we have a lot of up-close photos of our hot ends, you might notice that we have wires to disconnect parts for easy replacement. Mm-hmm. If you're on ABS and you forget to go and turn off that part cooling fan, you don't have to re-slice the whole model. Just go and disconnect the fan and let it run as normal. Just make sure you're disconnecting the part cooling fan and not your heatsink fan, or you're going to have a busy afternoon of declogging that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Henry Stofferin says, don't forget to hit that like button. Absolutely. Don't forget to hit that like button. Mm-hmm. We do appreciate it. And make sure that you leave a comment on today's video or today's live stream after the live stream, because I'll tell you, all those people that have left comments on the live streams last week and this week are all getting entered into the draw. So you've got chances to get entered more than once. And we're going to use an online picker to pick the winner. So make sure that you do that. Alrighty, let's, what do we got coming up? Anybody else? No other. Oh, there's a question I wanted to address that you mentioned, Matt Gurman. He says, I broke my FEP, he says, it's actually FEP film. On my resin printer, ordered some new FEP after over 1,000 hours of use. First of all, that's great. If you got 1,000 hours of use out of your FEP film, kudos to you. FEP film can cloud up very easily after, you clean your tank. Cleaning the tank, there's a fine art to cleaning it so that you don't get that buildup of I want to say cloudiness on the film. One of the ways
you get a film on the film.
Yeah, you get a film on the film basically, and you can never get it off. You can't clean it off. So when you empty your tank, let me grab my tank from over here. Brian, just talk amongst yourself.
Yeah, and just regarding FEP, for those of you who are inspired now to buy a resin printer, please go and find a means of ordering spare film. It's something that does not go bad in storage, and it is indeed a consumable on most printers. And luckily enough, most companies have been making vats where you can go and replace them. Some of them are meant to be disposable vats, but make sure you can get a couple of vats and a couple of FEP sheets. And then that way, when it eventually wears down, because it will wear down just at different rates, it's good to have it on hand so you're not waiting 3 weeks for the sheets to come through again. And we're going to, as we go into resin printing, we're going to share more about our tips and tricks to extend the life of your FEP film. And just so you know, just because it's cloudy doesn't necessarily mean that the film is bad. Just true. By the nature of how the light goes through, you want to watch it and start to see when you start to see distortion in your model. And there's a whole world up there, but the cleaner your FEP film is, the sharper the pixel light pass through will be, and therefore the sharper the edge on your model. But as it clouds, it might even create for you a natural smoothing effect, which might be to your benefit on your models. But if you're looking for that absolute measurement accurate down to the 10 microns on any pixel there, then yeah, you do have to keep it very clean. But a lot of my VATs, through model switches and everything, I haven't personally had to replace a sheet yet. I know Jess at one point got mad trying to pop a model off because she didn't know how and ended up poking a hole in it, and that's where I see people making that mistake. But we'll cover a little bit of it down the road, but if you guys haven't watched Uncle Jesse's videos on VAT cleaning tricks, that is a necessary watch in my mind. There are some things in there I didn't ever even think about until I watched that video, and they saved my butt several times, guys. So don't think you have to get in there with an ice pick and start clipping it off there. No, there are way better ways out there.
Yeah. Now, the other thing is, you'll notice that this is kind of cloudy. If I put my hand behind it, it's kind of cloudy. You can see it in front of my face. It's kind of cloudy. This is still fairly good. What you don't want to do is you don't want to use alcohol in this area. When you clean it out, take your cloth, clean it out just by wiping it out. That's all you want to do. You don't want to use any kind of detergent on the inside, and you should never have to use any on the outside unless, of course, you've got a pinhole in here and your stuff is leaking out. You can see that there's screws that go all the way around here that hold this in, and you can hear that drum sound. That's the sound you want to hear when your FEP sheet is properly put back on. The other thing is you are always, and this is never going to change, you can see there's a white ring around here. That is old material that just seeps underneath that one edge, and it's almost impossible to get to. The other thing about FEP sheets, there's three different thicknesses of FEP sheet. There's a 100 micron, there's a 150, and there's a 200 micron, which are typically sold for Resin 3D printers. Now, the ones that I buy are usually the 200 micron. I like the thicker ones. They will cause you to have to re-level your bed, and you'll actually hear it when your build plate comes up out of the resin vat. You'll actually hear a little pop every time that it comes up, because that FEP sheet is a little thicker than the piece of paper that you're using to level that bed at the very beginning when you are getting started to do a Resin 3D print. Peter Reynolds is asking, you can also get floaters in the resin that will mess up your FEP, so make sure to strain your resin. Yes, you can get floaters. And what floaters are little pieces of cured or semi-cured resin that will break off the model because of that pop that we just talked about. They may break off if they're really tiny, and they could float around in the resin and then get stuck in other pieces, or actually even stick to the FEP film. If things get stuck to the FEP film, what you want to make sure of is that you don't have this in the machine when you're trying to get that off. You want to drain all of the material back into the bottle, strain it with a strainer of some sort, whether that be a coffee filter or a painting filter, an automotive painting filter, which are typically sold for this purpose as well. Get all that material out, and if anything is stuck to the FEP film, use a plastic scraper. Get underneath it and pull it up and get it off. Because at the end of the day...
I'm going to share...
Go ahead. Because at the end of the...
little... We have a time delay. Sorry, guys.
Because at the end of the day, you don't want to puncture this. If you use a metal tool or a metal scraper on this, you can very easily cut through this or pop a little hole in it. So don't use a metal scraper in here. Always use a plastic one. Okay, go ahead, Brian.
So Yeah, so here's the trick that Uncle Jesse was kind enough to share a couple of months ago, just in case if you guys can't find it here. Some printers you may notice it has a tank clean feature, other ones it doesn't, but the concept is the same. So when you turn on the tank clean feature, or you create an STL that fully lights up the screen, you can set a setting to cure an entire layer on your machine. So what you want to do basically, because the homing method, if you ever open up the files, I'm trying to remember the exact file format. It's like 5 letters there. Some of them are just G-code executions and give a lot of information in there.
Yeah.
So, and if you look inside your resin slicer, there is a command in there that starts off with homing your build plate. So if you take that out, you can start curing layers without moving your build plate. So what you can do is run this, and it goes and cures the entire bottom screen portion as a block of resin. And now you may say, well, how am I going to get that big sheet off? Well, many people are printing resin items that have supports and a big base on that. So what Uncle Jesse's trick was you take that piece of leftover resin that you're going to throw it anyways, put it in the bottom of your tank somewhere on the screen, and then run the tank clean feature. And then once that's done, you can take those supports and use it to lift and peel the whole sheet off the FEP film on the bottom, removing any little items that you could not pick off regardless of how hard you tried. Now, the downside to this is, yes, you're wasting a minuscule amount of resin. We're probably talking 5 cents of material, not very much. But in the early days, that might have been an issue. Now with resin, I've seen it as low as $42 Canadian per liter. Yeah. And I think Elegoo and a couple other companies have made it even cheaper now, like $37.99. Resin is getting much cheaper. So if you're looking at something to clean your tank, that's going to be the best way of peeling it up without causing puncture marks on your FEP film, because that's usually where FEP breaks, is small puncture points. And Peter Reynolds, especially though, talking about the filtering, that's a great item to consider. And unless you really know your machine, you probably should strain it every couple of prints. Usually I will go and run the scraper kind of loosely through just to make sure I'm seeing no particulates on the bottom, because that's when you crack LCDs. So if you're feeling like shopping this long weekend for I think the Americans have a long weekend here too. If you're shopping this long weekend, you can get now on Amazon little silicone funnels that come with a metal strainer in them, and always keep an empty bottle of resin laying around. You'll take your vat, pour into there, let it all drain out, go through the filter, and then pour your bottle back into your tank. And that way you're not wasting any resin.
That's a very good tip. And it's something that we practice all the time when we're doing resin printing. And I've got a bunch of resin printing I'm going to be doing here this week for a good friend of mine, and that's why we are going to jump into another resin video for you guys, because I feel that it's important that you need to know a little bit more about resin and why or why not you may want to get or may not want to get into resin 3D printing, depending on what you're doing. If you're comfortable doing big things, resin printing's not necessary for you. But if you're starting to get into stuff that needs a lot of detail, and I use it a lot when I do statues, because I like to see the detail in the head, which you can somewhat get out of an FDM printer, because some FDM printers will go as low as 50 microns, but resin printers will go as low as 10 microns, giving you much more detail. And with the advent of mono screens in a lot of today's resin 3D printers, which I mentioned yesterday, you are going to find that you're getting faster prints and you're getting more accurate prints. You're going to see less layer lines. There still are layer lines. Don't get me wrong. We've sanded many resin 3D prints around here that still have layer lines, and we've done them at 20 to 30 microns per layer. And be aware that your printer may say it'll do 10 microns, but not all of them do. That's something to be aware of.
And we can briefly talk about this here. The reason why specifically 10 microns. For those of you who've never torn down your resin printer, apart from the LCD control circuit, there's a stepper driver that drives a standard Z motor similar to what you see in all of your FDM 3D printers on a rod in the back that may or may not have the exact same thread count. So the layer height, potentially your FDM printer, you could get down to 10 microns in a theory, but the reality is that with the width of the nozzle, it's impractical to get a consistent flow out of a nozzle when you're incrementing by that amount. But when you have an LCD, and we can do the pixel math in a future video to show you guys what the XY resolution is per pixel on these machines, you can then cure at those much smaller layers because the material is a liquid already sitting in between there. So 10 micron, you're going to rely on your Z-Rod getting back to that 10 micron position every time.
You bet.
Now, again, it's theoretically possible to get it tighter and tighter, but for those of you who have seen what a 10 micron resolution looks like on a top layer, where you can visibly see layer lines, it's the smallest amount of a layer line. It's just visible because the rest of the resin usually is so darn clear. So bear that in mind. Do you really need precision down to 10 micron? No, not at all. In fact, most cameras won't even see it unless it's at, say, a 4K resolution and you're doing a macro mode. Yeah. So yeah, the main thing with resin is, number one, you can print a consistent level of detail with direction changes and so forth that are not even possible in a FDM realm. And eventually we're going to get to our FDM versus resin with the technology settled in. But the fact is there's benefits to both sides, and there's a reason why Richard and I both have FDM and resin machines.
Mm-hmm. They're both, like I said in the video yesterday, they're good at different things. And as I've always said on this show, the right tool, the right job. Don't get a tool that will have that you can really do 7 things with. And this is why I've always said that 3D printers are great at 3D printing, but they suck at laser engraving. Laser engravers do great at laser engraving, but they suck at 3D printing. And I've experienced that. And Brian's got the 4-in-1 that we had here from eCube Maker. I gave it to him because, to be quite honest, it just does not meet all of my standards for a tool like that. If you're going to have an engraver, you're going to have a laser, and you're going to have a 3D printer, have separate machines. Yes, it takes up more space in your hobby room, but you've got the right tool for the right job.
I'd almost argue it doesn't. I would argue that the 4-in-1 takes up more effective room than those independent machines. And the reason is you have to look at the build volumes of each of the tools. And down the road here, I'm not quite on it, guys, but we're going to be building our own DIY laser. I know everyone's got kits now and stuff like that, but as I've said from day one, you have some extrusion and you have a good quality laser. The sad truth is a good laser right now is about $175, $200 Canadian. Yeah. And so it hasn't been worth my while to invest in one. But when the opportunity arises, we're going to go and look a little bit into that. Now with the CNC aspect of the EQ Maker, and this is no offense to the company, this is just outright to the concept. You got to remember with CNC, now you're adding an additional drag against your XY hot end. And so with the small machines, it is very difficult to prevent chatter in your motor spinning when you're dragging it against a material. And so if you go into the hobbyist market with CNCs, you're going to see they're using rack and pinion setups instead of linear rails or instead of belt-driven assemblies, and there is a reason for that. So, kudos on trying to create a universal product, but at the end of the day, I think the only guys that are getting close to the concept in a good fashion are E3D. So, as we discussed it last week, please follow them to check out their developments of their multi-tool head system and look at the rigidity they're designing into it to make it more than just an FDM tooltip changer.
Peter Reynolds has a great question here. He says, how important is expiry date on resin, and what's the effect of out-of-date resin? Those dates are important, just like you wouldn't want to eat bad food that's been expired. Resin, the expiry date, yes, you can use it after the expiry date, but your results are going to vary based on the resin that you're using. I only use Phrozen resin because I really like their resin. I've tried other resins. I've tried a few of the other ones that are on the market. Some have a really bad odor. Others don't. I find that the resin that I use, the aqua green from Phrozen, doesn't really have much of an odor. It's not odor free by any stretch of the imagination, but You will notice that even in your vat, resin will separate. If it's left there too long, it will start to separate because there is a thicker agent that is in your resin that will drop to the bottom, and the lighter material will float to the top. That's why they always tell you to shake it really, really well before you go ahead and dump it into your vat. And again, you don't want to leave material in the vat for too very long because it is going to run into problems. It's going to separate. Then you got to get in there and stir it up. And if you're stirring it up with something that might have a sharp edge, whether it be plastic or a metal, and again, you don't want to use metal inside your vat, you can damage that FEP, and you can cause a pinhole or a little scrape in the FEP, and it can cause problems later on to your 3D printer.
So just to clarify on that too, and Peter, maybe you can tell us in the chat there, does it say expiry date or does it say best before buy? And this is something that Canadian markets we deal with all the time with the various products, whether it's food, working materials, whatever. What you're seeing on there is the manufacturer's date that they say, you know what, we can guarantee our product is going to perform consistently up until that date. Now, we got a hold of some, how would we word it there? Rejected stock of resin at one point of some very high quality dental resin. And the reason it was rejected was because there was resin that's supposedly seeped out of the bottles because there was some clouding on the bags on the inside, and so the batch was rejected. As a result, we basically got it for free. But, you know, it's 2 years past the expiry date now. I took it out of the bag a couple months ago, gave it a real good shake, and it printed beautifully. So what you got to realize is that resin will not expire, but the properties of the UV curing may change, and depending on its environmental exposures across that time, the material may degrade in a different manner. Yeah. So when it comes, you know, I know they say shake on the bottle and most people ignore it, but yes, please shake the heck out of that before you run it. Now, when it comes to leaving it in the machine, I've actually left resin on the vat actively on my machine for upwards of 2-3 months. And as Richard mentioned, you're going to see swirling on the top layers and all that because the material is separating. And I've mixed it up and it did print fine. It did not cure. But if you're in an environment where you have a lot of exterior piercing light, that shell that you put over your printer is not guaranteed 100% UV filtering. It may be 99.7%, but it's not 100%. So depending on how it's exposed to the environment around it, it may begin to cure at a microscopic level, and that's where you may see issues like Peter Reynolds talking about, where you might even get little things that build up over time in there, kind of like a hailstone building in a hailstorm. Mm-hmm. So you always want to make sure that your printer is sitting outside of direct sunlight, regardless of your window condition. You want to keep your resin in a cooler place. You don't want to give it a place that it can warm up and swell inside the bottle and potentially crack the plastic bottles. But apart from that, so far, you know, we've only been resin 2 to 3 years here, so I can't talk about the 5 to 10 year life expectancy of the resin liquids. So far, my luck has been fairly good. But please let us know in the comments, especially those who jumped the gun on water washables, and let us know how that's degrading versus the standard resin, versus the ABS-like resins, versus the flexible resins now. All these different materials that are being added in to the UV curable resin to change the properties of it may have their own expiry dates, if you will, or best before dates. So, but so far I'm still using resin I got 2 years ago, and it's still printing fine. So, so take it with a grain of salt. Just if you're running like a production company where you have to have that machine going and there's going to be major losses, then keep up with it. You know, try and use your material before that date. But for home hobbyist stuff where you might be losing 2 or 3 hours, just use the old stuff. If people are selling old resin online in town that they don't need, just go out there, give it a good shake up, make sure you're not hearing anything bounce around in there, and then you're probably getting a good deal. I know, but I've done that once or twice with people who had, you know, sold their resin printers and were just sitting on the bottles, and I got them for a quarter of the price. And that's just my experimental stuff for stuff that I don't care about the curing time. I'm not putting it into production model. It's just little fidgets or prototypes.
Now, there's a great question here from Kieran Clark. He says, how much does temperature affect the resin print? Hot days versus a cold night when doing a long print. And I talked about this in yesterday's video. Kieran, if the temperature is cooler, the resin will take longer to cure. It won't cure as fast. If it's too hot, it cures too fast. So what you want to do is really have it in a room that is somewhat temperature controlled. So if it's in an office and I said yesterday, don't have it in your garage unless your garage has a steady temperature across the board. So through the summer, through the winter, if you've got a heater in your garage, if you're in a colder climate like we are here in Canada, I don't recommend putting your resin printer in the garage. But you do want to have it near good ventilation so that when it is getting rid of that odor of the resin, it can be vented somewhere. So that's something to keep in mind. But cold weather will definitely cause the resin to cure slower and may cause failed prints as a result of that. So something to keep in mind.
And this is something that people don't talk about out there, but you may have noticed a lot of people have had LCDs fail on them, and not as a result of cracking. And what it is how these are being set up. So when resin printing came out, the concept was quite simple. We're going to take a UV lamp, and we're going to blast light over a liquid crystal display, an LCD. Now, LCDs are designed for a certain level of light, a certain beam type, and a certain luminosity. And because of the resin, they were trying to achieve the fastest curing times, layer times for a faster print. The end result was that the liquid crystals inside that display were heating up, damaging the longevity of the screen. And so burnout is a very possible thing on the liquid crystal displays. Now, when the mono screens came out, the mono screens are a lot closer in design to your old school calculator. It's got two positions for your pixel, on or off. As a result of that, they can go and it doesn't have to pierce through as many layers. So all the LCDs you've seen on your resin printers that are not monochromatic are actually RGB ones that are having 3 layers of crystals blocking the light to cause a black pixel. And the result of that is why it takes longer for those layers to cure. But if you had to go in a colder environment where your resin takes 15, 20 seconds per layer, think about the other side of the LCD. You're blasting UV light onto that and deteriorating the LCD, and that will cause excessive wear. So just having it in a warmer room and having your settings adjusted so you're not curing as long as a result will actually extend the life of your LCD, even in the monochromatic realm. But the monochromatics, they do, as they call them, the mono LCDs last way longer. And that's kind of something we're just going to give you a heads up if you are looking into buying your first resin printer. Is what I've seen so far is that the Mars and stuff, the first versions that were regular LCDs, are not that much cheaper than buying the mono version brand new one. And you want to make sure it says mono on the product page, if you will, because your layer curing times, I kid you not, will drop from 12 seconds to 2. It's not a 2-to-1 ratio. It's like a 5-to-1 ratio.
Yeah.
And that all adds up to time on your manufacturing, on your design, your prototyping, and cuts your failed print recovery time in a fifth.
Now, Peter is saying his just has a date, but no best before expiry. I've just pulled the resin that I used in yesterday's video, which is the Phrozen resin, as I talked about earlier. And mine has no date on it whatsoever. I know when I bought it, I date the box when I bought it, so I know exactly roughly when I got the resin. And if I haven't opened it, this one actually has been opened, but it's still pretty full. It's a pretty new bottle, actually. So I know that this is going to last me, and I know that this is going to do a good job because I've also tweaked the settings in my slicer, which in most cases is a product called Chi2 Box. There's another one out there. What is the name of it, Brian? You know?
Lychee.
Lychee slicer, which a lot of people kind of got on and then left. I don't see a lot of Lychee slicer videos anymore.
Well, I think it's because their model was weird. Now this has been the problem in the 3D printer space. For those of you who've been around the hobby for a while, this is just the same party over and over again. What happens is, unless the slicer is developed by a company that manufactures printers, they're looking for your continuous model. And honestly, I still have yet to see the value in these subscription models for the slicers because they're not always adapting up. Chitubox even is working with a pro version, and they almost went a certain route that got a lot of people upset, and then backtracked really quickly when a couple other YouTubers covered it in detail. But what we're trying to keep away from with the resin realm is a proprietary structure. So when you are working on an FDM printer, you have a G-code file. You can read that G-code file, you can understand what's doing, and you can manipulate it. Now, in the resin world, almost all of the motherboards are developed by a company called Chitu Systems, and conveniently, they make Chitu Slicer. But they have kind of locked down the file format for a long time where other slicers could not slice in that file format, and they've never been one to release the source code for their boards. So then you get into a position where what if down the road they make Chitubox paid only, and the firmwares for their main boards come with a format that only they can slice on. And that's something that we want to discourage in this hobby. Now, there actually are a lot of other resin slicers that people never thought about, and this one will surprise you, Richard. Zortrax. Zortrax has a slicer that can slice resin and export for an Elegoo Mars, and I've used it, and it's good. It's actually really good. I haven't done a video on it because I haven't dug into many of the features, but the prints came out great. So there are options out there, and if you're willing to experiment, and that CLDDB whatever format, as long as you can CLDDLP, I think if I remember, if you can get into that file format and generate that file, your printer, resin printer regardless, should be able to print it basically. Yeah. So have a look into some of these companies that are making resin printers and look to see what they're recommending. There may be a few surprises out there you've never looked at.
Let's get into our last question for the day before we wrap things up. This is from Dominic Versetto. He says, I print prototypes for mechanical parts that will be produced in metal. Dimensional accuracy is important. Will resin do a better job, or should I stick with FDM? Threaded parts are important. It all depends on the printer that you buy. If you're going with a very entry-level printer, your dimensional accuracy can suffer based on the way that you're slicing or printing a file. With a regular printer, we'll use this lens as an example. When you print on an FDM printer, you're usually printing from the bottom up. When we print with a resin printer, we want to tilt that so that it's not printing like this, so it doesn't create a lot of suction on the bed. It's easy to remove from the bed. And now you're getting a cross section. You want to put your part on about a 30 to 45 degree angle. So you're getting a cross section, and you're going to be using supports. Supports. And I said that yesterday. It's very important that you use supports and you use them properly. So yes, they can be if you're looking at a higher grade of resin printer that is meant for industrial use. FDM printers, to me, are still the best for doing what you're doing, Dominic, because the dimensional accuracy is plus or minus, usually in that 10 to 20 micron area, based on the thickness of plastic and whatever resolution you're printing at. Remember, you're printing at a higher resolution in resin, and you're also printing at a different orientation. Brian?
Now, Dominic, I do have a loaded question, and this will lead into something that I have in the works right now. Are you producing the final product, or are you providing a prototype for the company then to mass produce? Because there is some neat stuff in the resin realm that I will be showcasing as soon as I have the right information to share with you. But a good friend of mine who is a jewelry maker, we are doing a little something that blends those two hobbies together. And so I can't wait to share that with you guys. But if you are looking, just FYI, and this kind of goes back to my discussion earlier, if you're looking at some small parts that you need printed in metal, or that you intend on forming in metal, it doesn't hurt to go look at Shapeways. So Shapeways allows you to upload an STL file into your private account and then gives you a drop down of all the different materials, and you can see a pricing structure. And, you know, with big things, I won't lie, like when you're going kind of like yay size, yeah, the prices are just astronomically high. Mm-hmm. But if you're designing, let's say, a custom threaded insert that's going to be tiny in size and you just need one wrap it off there, they can 3D print aluminum, they can 3D print brass and all that. And they have, you know, $200,000, $300,000 machines that none of us will ever own. And this is something, again, we push with this hobby, is that if you find you're going to have multiple purposes for a machine, it's worth the investment. But if you're Joe Blow and you just want to try something, there is more cost-effective paths. Even if that little brass insert costs you $50, $60 for them to make, it's still cheaper than the $300 investment, not including your time, to go and make a prototype that then you have to go and try out another way. So yeah, check out Shapeways. As I said, you can upload the STL right into there. It's got a 3D viewer in the browser, and then you can see all the different materials, and you'd be shocked into some of the random things materials you could print by that we will not be seeing in the consumer space for probably 10 to 20 years here.
You know, Brian made a good point when it comes to jewelry. This is what resin printing really does best at. Jewelry, miniatures, dental. Dental uses a lot of resin printers. The Formlabs, which is an SLA, and I kind of explained what SLA was. We'll go more into detail on that a little bit later on. Neither one of us own a Formlabs because they're just way too expensive. No. But here's a ring.
I've seen a couple of used ones in Ontario coming up. I've been tempted.
This is a ring. Hopefully it'll... that doesn't fit me, but this is a maker ring that I just printed off, and it's got fairly good detail. And this, if this was done in wax, we could actually cast this and make wax or make metal rings from that using a lost casting process. But we are out of time for today. Actually, we're a little over time today. I want to thank everybody for joining us today again, and don't forget to leave a comment down below, leave a like on this live stream today, and make sure that you are a subscriber. So this is your chance to get in on our first giveaway, which we'll be doing next Sunday live right here on Ask for Help. Somebody's going to win a mystery box, and we're excited about that. We're excited to give away the first one. I've been chomping at the bit to give it away, and I can't keep secrets, so. I want to get the first one out there, and for those of you that have bought T-shirts, thank you very much. For those of you that are still looking to get T-shirts, we have T-shirts available. All you got to do is just send me an email to richard@thefirstlayer.com, or you can message me on Facebook as well through the group, and we can get T-shirts out to you. And because we've worked so diligently on shipping out of Canada, we get some pretty decent rates, although in Canada it's still stupidly ridiculous. Sorry, but we are making them in-house here, and we're giving you stickers and all kinds of stuff so to go along with that. So you guys have yourselves a great rest of the long weekend. For those of us that are celebrating it, Thanksgiving is here. Enjoy your turkey and your stuffing and your cranberry sauce and your potatoes, your ham, and whatever you're going to have. I'm making him hungry now. Look at him shaking his head. So until we see you guys next week, remember that
the first layer is always your foundation to a great print.
Have yourselves a great weekend. We'll see you guys again next week with more on resin on Saturday and right here on the First Layer for asking your questions on Ask for Help. Bye for now.
See ya.
And we're out.